Welcome back, yogis. My name's Alex. Thank you for joining me. Today we're going to do a really mellow practice, a little different focus than some of the other ones. In these postures, we're not going to be looking to stimulate range of motion through really deep stretching in the muscles, but we want to be a little conservative with our range of motion, just going to the place of sensation and stimulating your myofascial connective tissue. I have a block handy. It might be nice if you have tight hips to use it to sit on in a couple of the postures. You can also use a pillow or a cushion. And it's going to be a little less talking and instructions after the setup. So it might be a nice class for you to put on some of your favorite music, something that's really mellow and relaxing, dim the lights, light candles, whatever helps you get into a very comfortable space. So begin in butterfly, which is kind of like cobbler's pose. But your feet will be a little further forward than normal. So often in cobbler's pose, we bring the soles of the feet together and the heels close to your groin. In butterfly, you're going to slide the feet forward and create more of a true triangle or more of a diamond. Lean forward, lift and reset your hips so you can sit on the sit bones and sit up tall without collapsing back. Place your hands on either side of your foot or feet. Take a big breath in. And as you exhale, just start walking the chest and the arms forward, creating as much length as you can. And when you start to feel resistance, just breathe there until your body invites you deeper in. Now, our focus isn't necessarily to get as deep as possible, but to feel the little tingles of the connective tissue when we don't force it and we just give it time. And in this posture, like other things in life, sometimes progress isn't a straight line. So sometimes you might have to back up a little to open up the possibility to move forward. So don't feel like you have to keep pushing deeper. You can always reset by coming back. And if you have some back pain or if you're injured, what you might do is do the same leg shape, but lie on your back. We're here to breathe. If you do have that block or a pillow, you can place it just inside the heels and use it to put your head down on. I'm feeling pretty good, so I'll go without the block. Observe all the sensations related to your body. Touching the floor and the places that are supporting you. Observe the sensations related to your breathing. The texture and the consistency of it. If you feel it in the nostrils or in the throat. The areas around your lungs that you can feel expand. If you can find new areas to explore. It's important that we don't just snap ourselves out of these postures. So we took plenty of time to get into them. So be patient coming out of it. Try to stretch the exit over 2 or 3 breaths. So as you're breathing, just come partially out of the pose. And then a little bit more. And a little bit more. Okay, a straddle. So turn and face the long edge of your mat and open your legs out wide. Now, don't worry so much about getting the widest legs as possible. Again, just go to the point of resistance. But where a lot of people struggle is if their tail tucks. So if you start to feel that you're collapsing back, you may need to bend the knees or put a cushion or block under your butt. We want your pubic bone, the front of your hips, to tilt forward and slide back. So less of a tucked tail, or what we call a posterior tilt, more of a tilt forward with the pelvis and anterior tilt. So a little bend in the knees to help set up. Then you can lift and scoot your butt back so your pubic bone tilts down, and then slide the hips forward so your thighs go a little wider. And what you can test is, are you capable of sitting upright without the support of your hands? Can you sit up tall without collapsing into your lower back? And if the answer is no, then we can either bend the knees, use your cushion, sit up against the wall. But let's get good at this first before we consider folding forward. And same idea, if we're going to do our side turns, our side twists and folds, just want you to sit tall. And if you have an injured lower back, twisting and folding might not be the best idea. So if you're feeling safe, sit tall, turn your chest to the right. If you're injury-free but tight, you might stay here, or start to crawl towards that right leg. Rotate the torso and try to level off the shoulders, and keep some energy pressing out through your inner left thigh, through the heel, and lifting the inner left thigh to the ceiling. And if you have blocks or props, you can make a little 2-block setup next to your shins and a place to put your head. But if your neck's not feeling bad, mine's feeling pretty good, sitting like this doesn't bother me at all. So if you're into it, you're doing great. And take your time. Inhale, or a few breaths to crawl yourself back up. Turn your torso to the left. Let's spend just a little bit more time in the kind of prepping stage. Let your connective tissue reorganize itself. And slowly start to crawl it over. Now again, you can turn your chest without having to fold. That's great. Keep the inner right thigh reaching through the inner heel and slightly turning up. Not so much where you see that your foot or your toes are turning out, but enough to where you feel your inner thigh is light and the right side of your lower back feels free to rotate right chest towards inner left heel. Ideally, we'd like to level off the shoulders, and if you have to stay tall to level off the shoulders, I think that's worth it. And if you can eventually explore depth, it's available to you. It is definitely a more tender and tighter side for me, so I just need to be a little bit more patient. If you notice imbalances in your body, observe them, adjust with them, work with them, but try not to get too frustrated by them. If you feel like everybody is symmetrical, go ask someone you hang out with to brush their teeth with their opposite hand that they're used to, and see if they can do it without moving their head side to side. A lot of things that we do, we primarily do with just one arm or one leg. It's part of living our lives. It's no worries. We just do the best with what we got. We observe, we adjust, we appreciate, and we progress. Four more. Take your time. Nice. And so center fold. So reset the hips, bring our torso back to center. Make sure that we can sit up tall. If we have to bend the knees or create a cushion, totally worth it. Allow the inner thighs to press out and up, not so much to where your knees turn outwards, but to where your inner thighs feel light. And then slowly, incrementally, start easing your chest forward. And our approach is more subtle than just trying to lengthen the muscles. Yeah, of course, we're putting muscles in positions that will be longer or shorter, but we're trying to stimulate the connective tissues. So subtle stressing on your tendons and ligaments, subtle molding of your myofascial connective tissues. We don't want to be super forceful. There is an element of support for sure. Lots of breath and patience. That's going to be our focus. So as you're breathing, if any distractions in your environment come up, try to just incorporate them as part of the meditation. There are always going to be distractions, and there are very few perfect places to meditate. I imagine a deprivation chamber works well, but it's a little harder to do yoga in a sensory deprivation tank. So, we just incorporate the things around you as part of it. I used to live on the island of Guam, and I would teach yoga at one of the resorts there. And it was just perfect. Like the scenery was impeccable. Our evening classes overlooked a sunset that was just out of this world beautiful. It was everything you would think that you'd want in a place to meditate. And right in my yoga class in the evenings when we would get ready for our shavasana or our resting and meditation period, the island drum show would start a couple of yards to our right, just beyond the bamboo trees. And the kids' pool to the left on the other side of the hedge would start its little game night, and it would just be chaos. My favorite place on the island was called Waterfall Valley, and it was cool. It kind of reminded me of like Fern Gully or like the Land Before Time. It was just impeccable. You couldn't see anything outside of the natural habitat. There were waterfalls around you. It was green. It was beautiful. but there were mosquitoes the size of my basset hound. There were so many things there to make it hard to be peaceful, even though everything was telling you that you were in a very peaceful place. And the thing is, we don't want to let these little irritants or distractions get in the way of so many great experiences and environments. I mean, how many of our relationships have little irritants or aggravations, but have so many great things? Do we really want to let those little things get in the way of all the beautiful things that are right in front of us? Carefully lead it back up. It's going to be a little tender, so take your time. Use your hands to bend the knees. Bring your feet hip width or so, feet somewhat flat. Hands behind your hips and real slow, gentle windshield wipers. When your knees go to the left, your right hip comes off the floor. And when your hips or knees go to the right, your left hip comes off the floor. Again, we're being real slow, very smooth, not trying to create new ranges of motion, just being very sensitive to what we feel. Let's come to laying on your stomach, please. So take your time. And if your neck agrees, you can either make a pillow and put your forehead straight down, stack fists, put your head on your fists. Or if you prefer, you can go arms along your sides, looking at your favorite shoulder. And we're going to be here for about 1.5 to 2 minutes. So take it upon yourself to balance the neck as you go. I'll give you an idea when we're at the halfway point. And just be good to your neck. It doesn't really appear that way, but laying in your stomach is considered a very gentle form of back bending. So it's a nice way for us to slowly move away from those minutes spent in a forward fold. And it's nice for many bodies to slightly turn the toes in and let the heels fall outwards. Not for everybody, but for many people, letting the inner thighs turn up and the heels fall out a sliver can be really soothing in the lower back, kind of comforting in widening those muscles on either side of where your spine meets your hips. If you're looking at one shoulder, change sides. And as you're breathing, try to find the back bottom sides of your lungs, not exclusively, but especially. Sphinx pose, chin forward. Place your elbows right below your shoulders so your forearms are flat on the floor and parallel. Your upper arms are straight up and down. Press down through your elbows. Pull back with your elbows. Widen the top of your collarbones and broaden the front of your collarbones. We're here for about a minute and a half. Let your inner thighs feel slightly light, the tops of your feet a little heavy, and your lower abs strong enough to feel supportive. Try not to sink into your joints. Stay tall, comfortably long through the neck, soften the jaw. Breathe, yogis, breathe. Three more. Carefully, elbows out, chin to your hands into your chin, bend your legs, and one more round of slow, gentle windshield wipers. About 3 times in each direction. Keep in mind it's the hypermobile or very flexible person that is at risk when we do windshield wipers, especially if you go too fast or too far. Okay, child's pose. Hands into the elbows, press your hips back to your heels. Allow the muscles that run the length of your spine to lengthen and soften, and relax the muscles of the low back. You can use your hands like a pillow. You can have the arms out in front of you, or you can relax the arms along your sides towards the wall behind you, palms facing up in a classic style of child's pose. Comfort is key, so let's get comfortable. Cow face pose. Be careful if you have outer knee injuries or if you've had a hip replacement. If you have had a hip replacement, you might omit this next one. Come onto your hands and knees. Reach your left knee behind your right knee so you cross your thighs and separate your feet. A pillow or a block to sit on can come in handy. Walk your hips back and to the left. Try to sit in between your feet. If this just doesn't work for your joints, you can straighten your left leg and try to put your right heel next to your left hip, allowing that right knee to get heavy to the left knee. So if you're tight, it might start high. Over time, you'll start dropping that knee. If you feel great, you can have both legs wrapped, both legs bent. Option 1, use your fingers behind your back and help yourself sit tall without leaning back or slouching. Option 2, hands on thighs, sit tall, same thing, try not to slouch or lean back. Option 3, hands to your feet or on the floor, crawl forward with the longest torso you can create. Take your time and change, please. Carefully. Sit up tall. Unwind the legs out in front of you. Give them a little shake and massage the sides of the kneecaps. Maybe even move up and squeeze up and down the IT bands gently in the sides of your hips and just get some of that stickiness to go away. And the calves. Now, if you're pretty pliable, you might just cross the legs from a seated position. For me, as a former soccer player and someone who used to lift weights, though it doesn't look like it, now I used to lift quite a bit of weights when I was in college. It's a lot easier if I just come forward to tabletop. I get a lot better set up and a lot more comfortable one. It's the same thing if you're an endurance athlete or a power lifter, just tight in the hips. It might be nice to realign here. So I have my left thigh on top, right knee behind. The left leg will be the top one when you come into your seated position. And we spent a decent amount of time on that other side. So if you're like, wow, this side's so much tighter. Yeah, give it time. Give it time. Be patient with the setup. Be patient with the depth that you want to create. And really be receptive to how your body responds. So your choices and your decision-making is informed by what your body is telling you and not what your mind is telling you that you want. You can use your fingers behind your back to lift your hips or lift your lower back up and forward. You can go hands on your thighs, or you can start to fold forward. And it's not that having a plan or an intention, or even if you're an athlete and you're using yoga as a tool to help your health or balance the strains of your athletic choices, we want to be very adaptable when we get into the moment in our yoga practice. It's nice to come in with a plan. Hey, my goal is to do this. Totally agree. I like that as well. I come in with plans for your classes. But once we get into this kinetic space, once you start moving your body around and trying to adjust, it's really important that we're truthful with ourselves and that we take an honest approach. And sometimes that's a patient one. Sometimes it might be a little different than what you initially intended. But if we can be tuned in, if we can be honest, and if we're willing to adjust as we go, I think you'll climb more mountains and leap over more hurdles than you'd imagine. I also think you'd avoid a lot of the pitfalls of ignoring what you're experiencing, just trying to get to your objective. Basically, what I'm saying is be patient. Give yourself time. Adjust. So have lots of time, along with your observations and what you're feeling physically, which maybe you're feeling some in the glute max and the top front of the thigh, the upper outer hips, IT band region, outer lower back muscles. There's a number of places where you might be feeling this depending on your body. But if you're into it, observe how you're responding emotionally and intellectually. Notice if you're in a somewhat vulnerable place as far as your range of motion, a sensitive place, in your muscles, and all of a sudden your mind says, well, I need to stop doing this now, or I have other things to do, or if you're distracting yourself. Notice if you're having an emotional response. The great thing about the yoga environment, there are no negative feelings, there are just feelings. Should we label any of them as bad? Not necessarily. They're just part of the full spectrum of life experience. And rather than trying to control them or even analyze them, just watch them. Watch them come and go, watch them pass, watch them shape shift like the clouds in the sky. You have 4 more breaths. Carefully. Unwind. Oh, for me, that was quite an intense, sensational side. Very nice. Go through your gentle adjustments, little movements. Come into a reclined position on your back. We'll have a twist in a chair-like shape. So reach your arms out like wings. Set your legs up in a chair shape. We call it a 90-90. 90 degree at the front of the hip and thigh, 90 degree bend at the back of the knees. Wiggle your butt a little to the left and drop that 90-90 to the right. And then continue doing a little wiggling and scooting so you have a long spine, stable, comfortable hips. Your thighs are roughly parallel to the short edges of your mat. Your shins are roughly parallel to the long edges of your mat. Of course, you could deviate from that structure if you prefer. And we're not super concerned with getting your shoulder blades forcefully flattened to the floor. So if your left shoulder is off the floor for the time being, don't be forceful of it. If it comes down, great. If not, no worries. You might look up, you might look left. But get into your breathing. Three more breaths. Carefully return your legs to center. We'll take the opposite side, scoot your butt a couple inches to the right, create your 90-90, and drop your legs to the left. So your thighs are even with the short edges of the mat, your shins are even with the long edges of the mat, roughly. You can deviate. Abs are drawn in a little bit. Wiggle the torso and try to lengthen all 4 sides. Then you can look up or look to your right. Just be well, be comfortable, be with your breathing. Carefully. Return to center. Give your legs one last squeeze and adjustment. Shavasana, please. Slide your legs out, separate the legs. Arms along your sides, palms faced up. I'm taking up lots of space this time. You could do the same or just play with it until you find the optimal version of this somewhat snow angel-like shape. Close your eyes, maybe even cover your eyes with a light towel or an eye pillow. And just one time, breathe in. Out of your mouth. I encourage you to spend at least a couple of minutes here. Notice layers of subtle sensation, little tingles, little movements of energy, how your body will softly adjust itself as the connective tissue reorganizes. One thing I like about this approach to yoga is it reminds me that my body is very versatile in its capabilities and its tissues. And so to best serve it, we have to have a versatile approach. And this is a nice way to round out a lot of the strenuous or really challenging activity that you put yourself through. So savor this, soak it up a little bit. Drink extra water and try to get great rest tonight. As always, thank you for joining me. I love doing this. Namaste.